Let's go back into the project, and this one's going to be just a fun project. It's a little bit of a bonus project with some more advanced features of Canvas. So let's create a brand new JS file, and we can just call it spin.js, as we're going to be adding an image and making it spin on the page. And we could do this for any image. So it's going to be a really neat effect. Let's clear out some of this content. We're not going to use the animation frame. In this case, we're going to set it up and we're going to use an interval to keep the animation going. So this is another option if you want to do animations. So let's create our image object. So just call it img. And doing as we saw before, where we're going to create a new image object using JavaScript image. And that gives us the object to work with. We also need a few variables as well that we want to set. And this is going to be a value that's going to be changing, and I'll just call it POS. So it's going to be the one that's going to be incrementing. It's actually going to be the angle, or we could keep it something long like that, like angle rotation. So how about we call it, so we'll call it angle rotation, so short for angle rotation. And once the image loads, so onload of the image, then we're going to run the animation. And we also need to provide an image source. So we can use the same source that we did for the images, where we're linking to a web image as a source. And now let's go into where we're setting up the rotation. We're going to create a cache object, so we can cache the content, store the image locally so that we can use it. So it'll store the current this object, which is going to be referencing the image object. So it's just creating a simple cache of that object. And then using the set interval, which executes the code snippet repeatedly. So the same thing as what we saw within the animation. So let's set up the interval. And we need to set how many frames per second we want to run the interval. So do it every 40 milliseconds. And then tab that in. And then using the Ctx save to save the state. And then at the last part, we're going to be restoring the state of the canvas. So just do a restore here at the end. And then middle, this is where all the magic is going to happen. So first, just like with any animation, we have to clear the rectangle. So starting at 0, 0, and then using the canvas width. So we grab the full rectangle, and then also grabbing the canvas height. So we get the full rectangle object available. We're also going to be using Ctx Translate. And what Ctx Translate, it requires two numbers. So this is going to be the height and width that we're using to translate. And what this does is it's a method of Canvas API that ends translation transformation to the current matrix. So X is the distance to move to the horizontal direction, and Y is the distance to move in the vertical direction. And because whenever we're doing rotations, as we saw with the scaling, it offsets it. And it's sometimes difficult to make those calculations. And that's where you can use Translate in order to do that. And we can use the image height and width for that. And because we have the image cached, we're going to have a width as well as a height for that image. And this is also going to make it dynamic. So if we change the image, it will be able to translate to any image. Next, let's add the rotate. So rotate is an option, just as we saw with scaling, that allows us to rotate an object. So using the math pi in order to calculate the rotation, so divide it by 180 degrees, and then we're going to multiply it by our angle rotation value, and we're going to increment this rotation by 5 degrees. And we'll just wrap that in brackets so it's calculated out separately. And then last, but of course not least, we need to draw our image in the correct position. So we're using the image object, and then we're using the cache width value, and that's a negative on that, divided by 2. And we need to do the same thing for the height as well. And the reason we're doing that is that because when we rotate it, it rotates it around a certain position. And if we don't do this, then we're going to end up with a different angle of the rotation. So it's not going to be rotating around the same spot. So you can also resize it if you want it to be 50-50, and this creates this kind of odd rotation like that. So that means that we'd have to resize everything if we wanted that as a smaller image, or we could just leave it as the default image size, and that works fine. That allows us to do the rotation. So try this out and have some fun with it. I know this was fairly advanced, and there is quite a bit of calculation here. So you have to be good with math with these ones where you're doing the calculations and the angles and the positioning. So all of that is changing dynamically. So this one has quite a bit of calculation behind the scenes, but it's a really neat effect where you can rotate an image that's coming off the web.